Good morning, viewers. Welcome to Frankly Speaking with Vibhuti Jha. As we are all aware, Prime Minister's visit to New York, the United States, and the consequent actions that have happened after that have created quite a flutter, created quite some impressions on the world mindset, and everything that was said and done had its own impact and implication. So giving a break after that, it's important to revisit the entire scenario and evaluate one more time what is the impact and implication of what Prime Minister said, how the world leaders responded, how Mr. Trump responded, what was the scenario with Imran Khan's belligerency at the United Nations. These have all had tremendous impact and implications on the minds of people, both pro and con. Today we are going to talk about that in addition to several other issues. And to discuss that matter, I have great privilege in welcoming Mr. Mohan Wanchoo, an entrepreneur and businessman, to my studio today to have a clear one-on-one conversation. And because it is important to have a conversation in which you hear from a person who belongs to the affected area called Jammu, Kashmir and Ladakh, as I call it, Jammu, Kashmir and Ladakh, not Kashmir alone. And we Indians must be aware of that the cultural identity, the religious identity of the people of Jammu, Kashmir and Ladakh vary from one region to another. And that's important to hold in mind. So Mr. Wanchoo, really great welcome and thank you for coming here to join on this one-on-one. And I would like to hear from you, is that some time has elapsed, tempers have cooled, and we are now seeing what is coming out of the entire scenario. So looking at the United Nations speech, which was the top of the agenda for everybody, what do you think Mr. Trump offered the world in terms of, in Houston and India-US relationship? What did Prime Minister offer the world at his United Nations address? Let's talk about these two first, then we will go to something else.
Sure.
And that too, it's important to hear from you because you are a Kashmiri who is affected by the actions that have taken place there. 300,000 Hindus were thrown out of Kashmir. Not one Kashmiri strapped a bomb to blow up as a retaliatory action. The most peaceful religion was called a heinous Hitler thing by Pakistan Prime Ministers. I want you to sum up that entire thing and let's get back to that.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me to speak on your show. It's a pleasure being here.
Thank you.
There were many things that happened at the United Nations. And prior to that, the Prime Minister Modi's speech in Houston. But let me kind of sum it all together and then we'll dive into the details. Prime Minister Modi has set India on the world stage. It is unprecedented for an Indian Prime Minister to get so much support from an American president and then, to be seen walking hand in hand and hand on shoulder, etc., sends a very positive signal to the rest of the world that the two countries are together and they are working with each other for the benefit of mankind. That's the message that we got to summarize all the speeches, at least from my perspective.
No, there is definite impact and there are many implications of each one of the impacts. So for example, when Prime Minister Modi addressed the United Nations, all of us know that he was very polite, very firm, ended his speech in the allotted 15 to 7 minutes of time, and he implored upon the world to join India in its campaign for economic development. The whole concept of Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, Sabka Vishwas. So this is the all thing that will earn the confidence of people, and this is significant, particularly in current times, when the trust element, the trust factor with politicians is at its lowest ebb. The global leadership suffers from a trust deficit. I mean, we can see this all. I'm not propounding a new theory. What I'm saying is a real challenge that is happening. To that end, Prime Minister Modi exuded confidence. He emerged, in my opinion, and frankly speaking at that, as a true world leader who everybody wants to be like. That how did he energize so many, Indian diaspora all over the world. It's not the first show. It started with 2014. So Prime Minister Modi exuded people, come and join our policies, our efforts. If I can do it, you can do it too. Contrast that with the message of Pakistan Prime Minister, where he talked about nuclear holocaust, he talked about Islamophobia, he talked about everything negative. So much so that on one interview on CNBC, I don't know if you watched it, where one of the TV programs, one of the MSNBC programs, he was complaining about United States infrastructure, and the MSNBC host told him that you sound like a welder in Bronx, and he shut the interview after that. Tell us something about what you feel happened there.
Sure. So let me kind of start by saying, there's an age-old saying, verify and trust. You talked about, the fact that Prime Minister Modi exuded, a lot of confidence and, therefore trust. It came out very naturally from his speeches. For example, Prime Minister Modi talked about the establishment of 110 million public toilets. These are staggering numbers. He talked about opening 375 million new bank accounts. He talked about so many other things that have been very well received. For example, I think about 115 million new gas connections for cooking gas. So when you put numbers like these up, in front of the audience, of course, it brings about a tremendous trust in that government, in the minds of the audience. Not only this, the way he conducted himself was par excellence. For example, he's a great writer. He's a great wordsmith. He brought about, he played on words. He talked about the NRG Stadium having a lot of energy, and therefore kind of leading to the synergies between the United States and America. Now that's a master craftsman right in front of you. A person who has a tremendous hold on the Hindi language and not so much on the English language. For him to be able to, let's say, weave these three things, NRG, energy, and synergy together, speaks volumes about this wonderful human being who has a tremendous control over diction. But anyway, that's not what I wanted to talk about in detail. What I wanted to talk about was that Prime Minister Modi commands a tremendous respect when he speaks. He talked about the a few thousand people that were not able to enter the stadium because the stadium only accommodates 60 or 65,000 people, and some people had to go back. He personally apologized to the people who were not able to enter the stadium and had to go back because the stadium was full. He also talked about, he also requested, the audience to give a standing ovation to President Trump, who was there to show his support. For somebody, to do these things calls for a lot of admiration on part of Prime Minister Modi, because he commands this tremendous respect, and the way he conducts himself shows people how much he cares for everybody. For example, when he was talking about the label of the label of the show, Howdy Modi, he actually said that I really don't think people really wanted to know how Modi is doing. What they really wanted to know was how's India doing. And then in answer to that, he said India is doing fine. And then he said the same thing in many regional languages like Gujarati, Bengali, Kannada, Punjabi, etc., etc. And you should have seen the crowd. including Tamil, right? The crowd was hysterical. They were loving it, and such was the admiration for the Prime Minister, who says, "Hey, look, I'm just a sevak. I'm a pradhan sevak, and I'm here just to serve you people." And such humility and such caring for the other people cannot go unnoticed, and I think that's why people admire him so much for being a very caring Prime Minister.
And I totally agree with you, because he does come out. It's not a made up event in the case of Mr. Modi. It comes out very honestly that he's truly authentic and he means what he says. And to add to that, I must compliment you for coming up with a new word called wordsmith. So congratulations to you for coining this phrase that he's a perfect wordsmith. But words, people are now smart. When somebody is telling you something, you immediately understand whether it is true or false, honest or dishonest. Where Mr. Modi connects is because of his, intentional honesty that comes in his speeches. He means what he says, and to that end, at this point in time, he is ready to boil the ocean, if I may say. You cannot boil the ocean, but he is one of those leaders who is willing to boil the ocean, take the effort. That's why in India, he has taken tough measures. I mean, look at the real estate sector in India, which was all home for every black transaction. You were always talking about 60-40, 70-30. That's the way the transaction happened. To a great extent, he has formalized it, and even companies like Raheja's have to file for bankruptcy and to come under protection, which means he is really shaking up the system. And that's what people have begun to admire. I mean, look at banks, for example. Non-performing assets. You are a businessman. You always need money. So if banks are now being tightened, the belt is being tightened in the banks, that you cannot give money to corrupt elements, do more due diligence and get to know your clients better. Now, we drifted apart in this matter, but the point of the matter remains, which I will ask you to jump in here. You met with him. You were in Houston. So give a 1 minute personal glimpse of the man that you had, because that's important. Not everybody got a chance to meet with him. You got a chance to, you had an opportunity as a Kashmiri or whatever, that you were there with him. So share those impressions of that particular moment. We will get back to other questions later.
Sure. So first of all, let me just clarify. I was supposed to go to Houston,
but
I
didn't.
Yeah,
okay.
I finally did not. I was not able to make it, but I did get a chance to see him in New York. So I'll still fill you in.
My apologies for missing.
No.
I thought you were going.
Yeah, I was supposed to go,
Yes,
but
yes,
I was not able to. He is a charismatic person. And I think that what leads to that charisma is his honesty and his humility. Also, his actions. For example, he said, we've said farewell, and we bid farewell to corruption. We bid farewell to about 350 million fake companies, that were set up in India. He said we bid farewell to 80 million fake identifications.
Right.
That means there were 80 million people who had fake IDs, and these people did not exist. They're constantly trying, to clean up the system, and it takes a lot of courage and guts to take on, vested interests. When you are closing down companies that are not that are not genuine, you're taking on,
that's terrific point, because when I was talking about the boiling the ocean, he took on the mightiest elements of corruption in India and is dealing with it. Consequently, there is an impact on the economy. But we'll come back to that. Next segment, we'll talk about the impact and implication for Pakistan. And there's a reason why we will talk about that in the next segment. Stay with us. Welcome back. In this particular moment, we will talk about, more importantly, about Pakistan. Now, that's a country which is our neighbor on a no-choice basis. Now, we know every Indian has to now be aware of how the leadership of that country thinks about India, thinks about Hindus, thinks about itself and what it does, what it doesn't. So think about Prime Minister of Pakistan's statement in the United Nations. He talked about nuclear war with India, threatening India in that process. He incited violence in Kashmir, that once the things open up, there will be bloodshed. He went back to Pakistan and declared jihad on India. And not only that, he told the world that India is an economic power, that's why you are going to him, you are ignoring the plight of Muslims in Kashmir. Now, all these are fake interventions in the life of India. Now, that's something very important, because in my opinion, and frankly speaking, in my opinion, I think he belittled the office of Prime Minister of Pakistan. He belittled the people of Pakistan. He belittled his own faith, calling about jihad on people who don't matter to you. So tell us what you feel about how it has impacted Pakistan in this part of the world, in this particular moment.
I feel this is the first time that a head of state has conducted themselves in the United Nations in this fashion. I've never seen a head of state use such language, conduct themselves, in this fashion, and I'm frankly, I'm amazed. I'm appalled. For example, the whole conversation lasted about 50 minutes, 50. And the heads of state were only given 15 minutes, and I think Prime Minister Modi finished off in 16 minutes. And every head of state, kind of stayed within that time frame. But Imran Khan, took 50 minutes to finish his speech, which was more like a cocktail conversation. It was not coming from a person who is considered to be a head of state. The language utilized was I would think, below the belt. He openly, as you mentioned, called for jihad. He played the nuclear card, and he talked about how, his country and his government, are so helpless, how there are Swiss bank accounts, that are opened by their own people, and he holds the Swiss authorities responsible because they allow their own people to open bank accounts and keep money in those bank accounts. Well, that begs the question, well, these are your people. What are you doing to make sure that the problem is addressed at the root? Why are we talking about, Swiss bank accounts? He talked about, all the other countries, where they're not, they're not giving, Pakistan the attention that they need, etc., etc. For example, you talked about India being, a large neighbor. We have 1.2 billion people. They have only 180 million people. He talked about the fact that they're a small country, and they are suffering from terrorism. I mean, he said things like, that just make you laugh. You're suffering from terrorism. Okay, well, do you know that there are 130 UN-approved terrorist organizations that you house in Pakistan? Do you know that, you were housing Osama bin Laden, in your country? I mean, all these things, right there in the open. And then for them, to cry that, we are the victims of terrorism, that doesn't sit too well, with people who hear him speak.
And particularly in this modern time where the news travels really quick through the social media, through electronic channels, everything that you say is splashed all over the world instantly. And that's where it's important. I mentioned to you about how MSNBC host treated him, called him whatever he was doing. In addition to that, Bangladesh Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina really ridiculed Pakistan in the United Nations. Afghan Foreign Minister ridiculed Pakistan in Council of Foreign Relations address that he did after his speech. Not only that, Saudi Arabia is miffed with you because you suddenly decided to become the champion of Islam in the United Nations, which nobody gave you that authority to talk about other countries and assume the so-called leadership of against Islamophobia. These are important elements in the life of a nation, and this is what I would say he played a classic game of blame everybody else, take no responsibility. You know, that is what people said. I mean, you rightly pointed out that everybody laughed about it actually, that if your people are doing something, you should stop them. Why are you blaming Swiss to open the accounts? Well, that's their business. You can't tell the bank, don't open the account. Tell your people, don't go there. Have some rules and regulations to do that. And that's what is important. What lessons? And this is what intrigues me, that there are still people in India or rest of the world, professor of Rutgers University, who sing praises of Pakistan. I mean, even New York Times wrote an article that while all the terrorist organizations are in Pakistan, they said these are all merely supportive. Pakistan is merely supporting the restive movement in Kashmir area, not mentioning terror. What lesson we Indians living here and what lesson we Indians living in India need to take from this? Because this is an important moment, it's a watershed moment, because now you know Pakistan wants India dead. I would say that because this is the man who got his country because of Mahatma Gandhi, and he's almost like anti-Mahatma, anti-Gandhi, like anti-Christ. He epitomizes everything which Gandhi did not preach. So your thoughts on that? What must we Indians living here, living in India, think about it and act?
Sure. So what's really happening is something that the Pakistanis are very, very smart at. What they've done is they've infiltrated the media, and they're now infiltrating the educational system. Infiltrating the media means the New York Times, the Washington Post, etc., etc. They have their own writers that write, hate material in these newspapers. They are now going into universities and taking these professors into confidence and giving them only, all these lies that they want them, to listen to. And then, these professors and then some other people in the educational field are then conducting symposiums, etc., etc., and then basically just repeating what they've been told. It is very unfortunate and very irresponsible for the news media, because they're supposed to report both sides of news material. It's also very irresponsible on the part of people in the educational institutions to only listen to one side of the story and then talk about it like, that's the truth, etc., etc. However, be that as it may, your question was, what do Indians need to do to address the situation? And I really, really think that Indians really need to now wake up and then put their viewpoints forward, put the truth out there, publish articles in these newspapers where we present the truth of the matter, go to universities where these Pakistanis are spreading all these lies and present the truth in those institutions, and then go elsewhere wherever there are these lies that are being spread, and we need to put the truth out there so that then the common man understands what really the truth of the situation is. Because right now they're only hearing one part of the story, which is all lies, and they do not know the other half, which is all truth. And we need to really take it upon ourselves and then present the truth to the audience out there.
You are absolutely right that there has to be more active involvement of every Indian in this matter.
Yeah.
So, for example, I have seen Indian academicians, and I'm sure there are many of them. They end up talking about pro-Pakistan more than they talk about pro-India. I don't have the exact numbers, but if I'm 100% sure, if we found out, we will know there are many Indians who are in these academic institutions, but they will not speak for India. We will come back to this discussion and a little bit more after this short break. Welcome back. Talking about the role of Pakistan and how we must deal with it, it's important to understand that we Indians need to be more proactive. So when Pakistan talks about threat to Muslim lives in Kashmir, we need to tell them, we need to tell the world that India has had 40 million people who are Muslims in the country. They have prospered. Bollywood is full of Muslim actors, actresses, singers, script writers, songwriters, musicians, and they have prospered. Similarly, Air Chief Marshal Latif was a Muslim. Many chief ministers have been Muslims. 3 presidents of India have been Muslims. Aslam Sher Khan, to my great joy, was the one who scored the winning goal against Pakistan in Kuala Lumpur several years ago. Havaldar Abdul Hamid won Paramveer Chakra in 1965 war. These are any number of examples. Those Muslims who chose to participate with India, they did well. And I'm very proud of each one of them. At the same time, I'm disappointed that the Congress party led a campaign as if Muslims are victims. And I remember in one of the TV programs, a prominent speaker of Congress party said, Muslims are marginalized. And the interviewer asked him, but it was during your rule. So why are you blaming BJP for that? These are the issues which are important, particularly one more thing which I will seek your opinion on. Pakistan talks about human rights violations. Now this is the biggest cruel joke that is heaped upon India, whereas their human rights record, to use American slang, sucks. Your thought?
Well, their human rights records really are bad. For example, at the time of partition, there were the percentage of minorities in Pakistan was 27%. Today that number is down to 3%. And what has been happening is over the last 70 years, most of these have been converted over to Muslims. Some of them have been abducted, some of them have been killed, some of them have been tortured, etc., etc. Their own human rights record, is not good at all. Look at what's happening, in Balochistan. Look at what's happening in Sindh. Look at what the Pakhtuns are doing. There's unrest everywhere in Pakistan. People from these communities are not comfortable, are not safe in Pakistan. They're being converted and marginalized in their own country. So they should be the last ones, to speak about Muslims being marginalized in India. Like you rightly said, there is no marginalization of Muslims or any other communities, minorities in India for that matter. They've all occupied positions of importance. Look at the presidents of India. President Abdul Kalam was the most recent president, and Muslims are in every walk of life at topmost positions. So we don't need to belabor this point. Everybody knows that the minorities in India are really given extra care, and they are given extra attention, so much to the point that it's to the detriment of the largest percentage of Hindus. But that's our strength. That's basically what India is all about. And to your point that these things happened in the Congress government, yes, that's true. That's what happened. So if they're the ones that are talking about Muslims being marginalized, then they need to kind of ask this question of themselves. Why the question now being asked of the BJP? The BJP has nothing to do with this, and neither does BJP support this sort of a treatment. And BJP has always been a firm believer in the Hindu philosophy, which is Vasudev Kutumbakam. Every human being is a human being, and there's God in every human being, and it does not matter whether you're a Hindu or a Muslim or a Sikh or a Christian or a Buddhist, there's God in everyone. And therefore, that's the true philosophy of the BJP party, and that's what they implement.
And that's very important, because he characterized BJP linking with RSS and linked it with Hitler. And I think every Hindu, I'm not an RSS paid member, I'm not a BJP paid member, but I'm supporting because, frankly speaking, I believe in what we Hindus are. And think about the Sanatan Dharma practice, for example, Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam, for example. Mr. Modi gave a beautiful definition to that, to the world, so that they can accept it in a manner that he said, there is one sun, there is one earth, there can be one grid. So that is the message of Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam, which is people are now recognizing it. The growth in science and technology is bridging the gap between religious preachings and ignorance imposed by religion. Because we know now that thunder and lightning doesn't happen because gods are angry. So these are the issues which become very important. And that's also a very important thing, is that Pakistan Prime Minister's speech in the United Nations, in my humble opinion, almost fitted into the category of a hate speech. And when one of the presidential candidates talked about Trump being, declassified or banned by Twitter and Facebook, it thought occurred to me, what about Pakistan's Prime Minister, who virtually threatened a nuclear holocaust, incited violence, called for bloodshed? Should his social media account be suspended too? Nobody's talking about that, because Twitter and Facebook suspend your account for far less infringements. Wasn't this one such thing that there has to be an action taken by the free world? Freedom of speech doesn't mean calling out fire in a theater.
Yes, and not only that, not only should these things be not allowed, and his social media accounts be blocked, but I think the government of India needs to take this up more seriously with the United Nations. How are people allowed to say such things on the panel of the United Nations? Such hate speech and such hate mongering and such call for jihad, under the nose of the United Nations Secretary General, it should not be allowed. These are things that the world needs to take very strong stock of, and then something needs to be done. How can you play the nuclear card and say, oh well, we'll go down fighting, and then if we have to defend ourselves with nuclear weapons, etc., we will, etc. I don't know how the world body allows statements like these to be made in an august forum like the United Nations.
And that's where United Nations loses its legitimacy. It's not a place where you can come and spew venom on one particular group of people just because you hate them. And that's where, to have the teeth and the fang, United Nations must issue, India must force an issue. I must compliment India's response to the Prime Minister's speech, which was absolutely spot on. I'm absolutely wonderful that the First Secretary gave the speech a response, a right to respond to Pakistani Imran Khan's statement. We don't mean any disrespect to anybody, but when you are hit below the belt, you have to respond. And here is something we as NRIs, now Prime Minister Modi has made NRIs very proud. I believe I coined the phrase, which I said on another TV channel, the Prime Minister used NRIs as the new resources of India. So NRIs are new resource of India. Very proud, very vocal, and we should be. The question is what we must do, because our role is very limited. Because we are US citizens, we have a role to play in America, and we have a role to play in relation to everything else. So what can you and I do? Because there's an important backdrop to that. Pakistanis have told me कि आपके बनिया लोग दो आने के बिकते हैं. These are the statements, truly speaking. It's told to me कि आपके बनिया लोग दो आने के बिकते हैं. Now the question arises, that hurt me a lot. That yes, we have Jaychans and Mir Jafars in our country. How do we handle that scenario? Because we can't even think about it like this. We give Pakistani groceries, places in our Patel Brothers and other grocery stores where people come and shop. We give them income and they use that money against us. How bizarre is that? What can we do? I want to have that discussion, have your thoughts on it. Not putting you in a spot, but articulate what is possible.
Sure. So from times immemorial, Indians have, been kind of compartmentalized. People from West Bengal, don't talk comfortably to people from Tamil Nadu. People from Kerala don't talk comfortably with Punjabis, etc., etc. So, but anyway, let's fast forward, in time. Today we are at the crossroads, where these things are now affecting us, and therefore we need to respond. What I would think is we need to respond as a nation, and we need to respond together. Well, there were some statements being made in the past few days where some Pakistani, grocers have said that we will not, do business with Indian companies, etc., etc. Well, likewise, Indians, need to do the same thing. Okay, well, if you are operating, in our neighborhood, we won't buy groceries from you guys. It's tit for tat is just fair. If that's the route that they're going to take, Indians have a much, much larger population. They have a much larger buying power. We can cause a lot more damage to the other side than the other side can do to us. And therefore, the Indians have to start using their collective power and say, hey, look, if these are the things that are being done to the detriment of our society needs to respond. And we need to respond, in kind as well. We also need to, sitting here as NRIs, we can do so many things. We can, as I mentioned earlier, we can put the truth out in the media, because what's happening is Indians are very comfortable people, because we know we're doing the right thing, and therefore, we do not believe in going out and making statements, etc., etc. But that's finally come back to hurt us, because we're not very vocal. We think that we're doing the right thing, which we are, but because we're not vocal, it's kind of working against us. Therefore, we need to be more vocal, and we need to go out and make our position known and speak clearly as to what the facts are. We also need to invest in India. There are some NRIs, who are entrepreneurs, they're businessmen, etc., etc. India needs help. Kashmir needs help. At some point when the curfews are completely gone. I understand that for some hours in a day, things are open. Shops are open, and transportation is all happening properly. But at some point, when everything is completely 100% open for business, NRIs need to invest in Kashmir and start creating jobs, start creating industries there, start creating new enterprises, in which case the local population there will see all these good things happening, and then they'll start leading a good and happy life. And like in Prime Minister Modi's words, we will say goodbye and farewell to all the bad things that have been happening in that state for the last 70 years.
And that's a very important part to invest. Is very important element to get engaged. Just as India needs to be globally engaged, we NRIs have to be unitedly engaged, because unity in strength, and the strength is unity, has to be more than the story in Panchatantra. Because it's easy to say these stories, we love the stories, but when it comes to practice, we forget about it. And you did mention, and I compliment you for saying that we Indians are not united in the real sense of the term, because every state has thinking in a satrap mentality. मुझे ऐसा नहीं होता है तो मैं क्यों चिंता करूं? Whereas 3 lakh Kashmiri Hindus were thrown out of Kashmir, the blood had to boil then. It is not only now. Now the question is, I know one thing for sure. In my belief system, I feel that India will make a very determined effort to improve the economic lot in Ladakh and Jammu and Kashmir as well. But they have been getting a lot of money. So it's not that the money was a shortage. Money was not a factor insofar as the entire Jammu, Kashmir, Ladakh state was concerned. It's a usage of money that became very corrupt. So to that end, I also want to say that, yes, we Indians here must be more proactive. That would be one great example of Nishkam Seva, because we can't expect any favors for that. So that's a sacrifice we have to do for our mother India. So Let's talk about one more thing, which I came about something that is very important. It's about Prime Minister Modi. There's a very nice phrase that you are dressed but nowhere to go. That's the plight of Prime Minister Imran Khan. He was dressed, but he just didn't know what to say and what to do. So tell us something about the politics of it. I mean, is Prime Minister Modi deliberately playing a very smart game of marginalizing Pakistan? SARC is virtually dying. He brought in BIMSTEC, and he's building relationship with everywhere else. So in this process, he has played a good game in terms of telling Pakistan thus far and no further. So there has been a policy change in Indian mindset, the government mindset led by BJP, that we will not tolerate the Pakistani belligerence. Your thought?
Sure. So there are two things that are happening. One is all the things that the government of Prime Minister Modi is doing in the international fora to kind of work in unison in the direction of Pakistan. And then the second thing that the Pakistanis are themselves doing that's causing their own demise, which is two things. One is Prime Minister Imran Khan himself made the statement that 50% of their GDP is used in servicing borrowed money. So they are paying 50% of their GDP to service loans. As it is, Pakistani economy is in doldrums. On top of that, if half that money is going elsewhere, that makes the situation doubly worse. On top of that, all the terrorist activities that they're involved in, all of these things are just basically killing that country slowly but surely. On top of that, Prime Minister Modi's activities that are marginalizing Pakistan are also helping, and it's only a matter of time that something will have to happen. Otherwise, we'll just have to see what's in store next.
Like every conversation has to come to an end, time is up. But why did we talk so much about Pakistan today? It's primarily for the reason, I believe, that we are entering a very interesting phase in our relationship with Pakistan. Let's remember one thing: hate can't have a noble justification to it. And when you talk about life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness as part of our constitution, both places, life comes first. And to that end, the world community must arise to protect innocent lives and save them from terror practices, regardless of whatever justification they might have. Thank you very much for being with us. See you next week. We'll talk more about India at that time. Thank you.